Good evening, this is Meridian. Now the news from ITN in London with Trevor MacDonald.
From the headquarters of ITN, News at 10 with Trevor MacDonald.
Minutes to go, America poised to attack defiant Iraq. British Tornado pilots could also be in the action. British troops come under artillery fire in Bosnia. And the leaking oil tanker is beginning to break up off Shetland. Good evening. The final countdown has begun. In about 30 minutes, we could see America's response to President Saddam Hussein's continuing defiance of the West. The Iraqis were given 48 hours to remove their missiles from the southern part of the country. But throughout that time, they refused to say precisely what they intended to do. Today, that changed. Baghdad announced unequivocally that it would not respect the Western ultimatum. In that case, said President Bush, Iraq must pay the price. Tonight in the Gulf, 30 American warplanes are in the air over southern Iraq. British Tornadoes and their crews are on standby. In Washington, George Bush, in the dying days of his presidency, is preparing once again to confront his old adversary, Saddam Hussein. We're going straight over now to Washington and to our correspondent, Bill Neely.
They've grown accustomed here in Washington since the Gulf War to speaking about confrontations with Saddam Hussein rather lightly. Games of cat and mouse, cheat and retreat. They're not using those phrases here tonight in Washington. This is by far the most serious face-off to date. And today, America did all in its power to persuade Saddam, once and for all, to back down. George Bush went to the CIA today to bid the intelligence community farewell and to encourage them in this latest challenge.
The threats we face are real. We need more intelligence, not less, if we're to meet the challenge.
He met his top military advisors, told Saddam Hussein, you know what you have to do, and spelt it out in an interview with Sir David Frost.
My message to him would be, please abide by the UN resolutions, or you're going to pay the price for that. And we're not threatening. We're simply saying he is going to do it, and he will.
From Baghdad, though, a defiant message. Deputy Prime Minister Tariq Aziz saying Iraq won't remove the missiles from the no-fly zone under Western orders, and if they're bombed, he says, Iraq will retaliate.
We're not interested in a dialogue. We're interested in seeing them take the necessary actions to comply.
To emphasize the danger facing Iraq, the Pentagon today released audio and radar recordings of an American warplane shooting down an Iraqi jet 2 weeks ago.
Benji saying I'm looking for clearance to fire.
The American pilot first targets the jet, which had defied the no-fly order.
Clear to kill, clear to kill.
Locked in the U.S. warplane's sights, the jet is destroyed.
Benji, splash one.
The American public is being prepared for action.
We are maintaining a high state of readiness, continually throughout this whole process.
Highly visible preparations off Iraq today on board the U.S. aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk, leading a strike force of nearly 200 warplanes awaiting imminent orders. And to add to the war of nerves, Iraq today banned UN planes from the country, violating agreements to allow inspectors free access.
We're out of here. Thank you all very much.
George Bush is on a final collision course with Saddam, waiting to be told in the next few minutes if Iraq's weapons have been withdrawn, poised to destroy them if they have not. Well, that intelligence report may not in fact be crystal clear. Bad weather over Iraq has prevented spy planes and satellite photographs from firmly establishing whether the missiles that were moved yesterday have in fact been withdrawn or merely hidden. So the tension will last well beyond the 10:30 deadline. This is Bill Neely in Washington, handing back to London.
So, what is President Saddam up against? Our diplomatic editor Edward Sturton looks at the Allies' firepower in the Gulf and at their likely strategy.
Iraqi television has been pumping out pictures of a confident Saddam, just as it did in those final days of the UN deadline 2 years ago. Then, of course, he misjudged the will of the international community. He may be about to do so again. because the rhetoric from his enemies is as tough now as it was then.
We've told Saddam Hussein, he's been told quite clearly by the Allies, that we wish to ensure the safety of the no-fly zone. Firstly, he must honour the no-fly zone, there must be no more flying in it, and secondly, he must remove the SAM missiles. That's made perfectly clear to him. He knows that. He set a time frame for it. I hope he will comply.
A show of destructive power on the scale of the Gulf War itself is not an option tonight. 2 years ago, the Americans had, after all, assembled a coalition force of more than 500,000 service personnel over a period of months. But the old coalition still has more than enough high-quality hardware in the region to deliver a sharp lesson to Saddam. At Hamis Musait, 20 of the stealth bombers which did so much damage 2 years ago. At Dhahran, 70 combat jets, including Britain's Tornadoes, another 70 jets aboard the American carrier Kitty Hawk in the Gulf, and to the north at Incirlik, 50 American, French and British jets. So the strategy could be similar to that adopted in the first hours of the Gulf War itself. Surveillance planes and satellites will already have identified key command and radar installations. Stealth aircraft could begin the attack targeting Iraqi air defense positions. And to help neutralize Iraqi defenses, so-called wild weasels could be used to find and destroy missile radars, opening the way for attack aircraft to strike their target. British Tornadoes would almost certainly be among them for political as much as military reasons. The coalition governments are anxious to make it plain that this is not simply an American operation. The Tornadoes are equipped with the so-called tie-out system. A laser directed from one aircraft fixes on a target, guiding in bombs delivered from a second plane. The system proved itself for the first time during the Gulf War. The other piece of hardware which inspired enthusiasm among the strategists during the Gulf War was the cruise missile. It was fired from the relative safety of ships in the Gulf. It could be used again if safety is a priority this time round.
Our Middle East correspondent Robert Moore is in Amman in Jordan tonight. Robert Moore, President Saddam Hussein likes to pose as a hero in the Arab world. Does that kind of image have any sort of credibility at all in places like Jordan?
Well, Trevor, one of the most intriguing elements is that although Saddam is viewed with contempt by many Arab regimes, amongst ordinary people he is still perceived as a popular and even heroic figure. Tonight we were able to watch the news bulletin from Iraq, and again it was the same display of self-confidence. We're not certain of the date of the footage, and much of it is clearly propaganda, but to many people, especially the poor and Palestinians, he is seen as the only Arab figure to defy the West and survive. That's why he plays on the idea of Arab pride and sovereignty, and they're attractive chords to many in the Arab world.
Robert, when I saw President Saddam Hussein just before the start of the Gulf War, he felt he could hector and intimidate and almost frighten the West. Is that part of his psychology now, you think?
I think it is, Trevor. I think for a man who has a shattered economy and a defeated army, he has two resources in abundance. One is cunning, the other is confidence. After all, he's lost much of the control over his own territory, and yet he's seen as having tried to regain much of the political control from his own people.
Robert Moore in Amman, thank you. As Allied forces, including British airmen, faced the prospect of military action in the Gulf, British troops 1,000 miles away in Bosnia came under heavy artillery fire today. It was the first concerted attack on the British Army base in Bosnia since the contingent of 2,500 troops went in. Tomislavgrad came under bombardment throughout the day, apparently from Serbian gun positions. Jeffrey Archer at ITN has this report.
Sirens sent people running in Tomislavgrad this morning. The town's normally considered safe, but about 100 shells were fired into it today. Some landed close to the UN base, manned largely by British engineers. No injuries, fortunately, but it was a warning of how vulnerable the British could be to Serbian guns. Prime Minister John Major visited his base before Christmas to tell the troops the UN may authorise force to be used against Serb helicopters defying the no-fly zone over Bosnia. The army warned him then that the Serbs might retaliate by attacking them. He assured the men of his concern.
Be absolutely certain that the matter foremost in the minds of the government and others will be to ensure your security out here.
The main British base at Vitez is highly vulnerable and would have to be evacuated rapidly if the Serbs shelled it. The Ministry of Defence has yet to take a final decision about how to strengthen the protection of British troops in Bosnia. But today's artillery barrage will have given new urgency to the contingency plans which are being prepared here in Whitehall. In Portsmouth today, the Royal Navy was getting ready to help if needed. HMS Ark Royal was preparing to leave for the Adriatic at short notice if the government orders her to do so. Extra supplies were brought on board. Ark Royal's Harrier jump jets could help enforce the no-fly zone, protect ships on sanctions-busting patrols and support ground troops. Artillery units are already earmarked to be sent to Bosnia to answer fire with fire if the British bases come under attack. Ark Royal Sea King helicopters could transport the guns and help evacuate the ground forces. A final decision on whether to deploy Ark Royal will have to be made in the next few days.
And a Bosnian government minister has been killed while travelling with a UN convoy from Sarajevo airport to the city centre. Hakija Turalic, Bosnia's deputy prime minister, is reported to have been taken from his vehicle and shot after the convoy was topped by 2 tanks. Coming next on News at 10, the very latest on the Gulf crisis as the deadline for action approaches, plus the day's other stories. The struggle for survival in Shetland, the government imposes a ban on fishing. George Walker, boxer and businessman, is charged with stealing £12 million from his own company. And in Focus on Britain, the controversy over the hunt for Joanna Young's killer and the boyfriend under suspicion.
People just saying, you know, oh look, here comes a murderer, you know. You overhear these things, you're not meant to hear them, but you did.
Up to £175 off next summer's holidays for only a £1 deposit.
And their Summer 93 giveaway means you could go free.
Free? So where are we going then?
Ooh, Caribbean looks nice.
Settled then. Costa del Sol.
Thomas Cook are packing a great deal into next summer's holidays. So don't just book it. Thomas Cook it.
This Sunday, inside the Sunday Times magazine, the one piece of equipment every skier really needs. A free ski pass voucher worth over £75 in most resorts throughout Europe and the USA. In the paper you'd expect something special from. The Sunday Times is the Sunday papers.
In the Magnet Kitchen and Bedroom sale, the added attraction is interest-free credit on all fitted kitchens and bedrooms, but only till Monday.
Because Direct Line don't pay commission to brokers, we can pass the savings on to you. So let Direct Line cut out the middleman. For cheaper motor insurance with a human voice, call Direct Line on 081 686 2468.
A married woman.
And a lad half her age.
They confessed to being lovers.
And her husband?
His body was found in a chalk pit 2 years after he disappeared.
How did they...
Identify him? From dental records.
And other forensic evidence.
Did her lover kill him?
Well, when they found the murder weapon, the fingerprints turned out to be hers. Week by week, Real Life Crimes investigates some of the world's most puzzling crimes and reveals how they were eventually solved. Don't miss part 1 of Real Life Crimes.
Good evening, campers. This is the Panda Fire, yours for under £5,000. And this is the Uno Fire for under 6,000. But hurry, they're selling like hot crumpets. Fido? Fido.
You are taking part in a commercial for TAG, the lager brewed by Jakob Stauder. You are paired with ice dance champion Olga Sukova. Learn your lines and repeat them after the bleeps. Oops. Ouch. And can't we discuss this over a bottle of TAG? Good luck. Treffliches Altenessen Gold. Ask for it by name.
Nearly 4 days on, the grounded tanker Brer is beginning to break apart on the rocks off Shetland. According to salvage experts, that doesn't necessarily mean that more oil will be spilled. One view is that it may be easier now to recover the remaining cargo. In another development, the Scottish Office today banned all fishing 20 miles along the coast either side of Sombra. Kevin Dunn is in Shetland.
After a fourth day's battering by the seas, the Brea is beginning to break up, emphasising the urgency of the salvage operation. The Transport Secretary inspected the scene from the air, getting first-hand evidence of the difficulties the salvage experts face.
I must say it is a very distressing sight, and obviously it's a very great tragedy. I've been keeping in very close touch all the way through, and we have been pulling out all the stops to do everything we possibly can. But you can see from the conditions here today that the weather has been rather difficult.
A break in the weather allowed ITN colleague Paul Davis to assess the chances of a successful salvage.
It's been extremely bad weather up here. I can tell you we're being buffeted about at this moment, although the salvage teams are stressing. Just with one break in the weather, they will have a go.
Just have to go down a little bit, the weather, and we will put men on board. Equipment we will minimize, of course, just to the pumps and some hoses. And we are hopeful that we will be able to pump oil from the vessel.
The appalling weather is not only stopping any attempt to salvage the ship, it's also hampering the clean-up campaign.
The failure to stop the slick has shut down a quarter of Shetland's salmon farms. George Williamson, the first owner to find an oily sheen covering his hatcheries, threatening 80,000 fish and his livelihood.
Well, if a lot more oil comes, it'll certainly affect us because nobody will want to buy the fish.
If this gets completely polluted, your livelihood is gone within a week or a couple of weeks.
The fishermen themselves say they've got to suspend fishing to protect Shetland's reputation for quality.
We were producing some of the best fish in the world before, and we're going to have no fish leaving Shetland at any standard of anything less than that.
Sea walls are under hurried construction to safeguard the still unpolluted waters, but the conditions are too rough to deploy effectively miles of booms which are stacking up on quaysides. Meanwhile, the crew, who many Shetland Islanders hold responsible for the tragedy, have been questioned by the accident investigators. For many Shetlanders, it is a time for prayer, for their future and for that of their island. Kevin Dunn, News at 10 on Shetland.
The toll on Shetland wildlife continues to rise. Apart from the hundreds of seabirds affected by the oil, there's now concern for the seals swimming in the waters off the coast. Our Scotland correspondent Hugh Pym has more.
The weather is increasing the agony for birds like these shags, covered in oil, clinging to survival, unable to fly, and likely to perish. For many, a desperate struggle to escape, fleeing the oily seas inland to alien territory. A narrow escape, a wildlife rescue team reached the bird just in time. Now it'll be flown to the mainland for treatment. It should survive. So should this guillemot, a seabird forced to take refuge in a field. For the seals, a more prolonged ordeal, suffering in the polluted waters. Probably a slow death for some. This seal expert has come to Shetland to help mount a rescue operation. He could not rescue this one, washed up dead on the beach, its skin covered in oil. It is a painful sight for a man whose life is dedicated to saving seals.
Very emotional to me. I'm very upset, but I'm determined to do something. Most of the seals have got to come in. The seals in this area especially, they're in their environment, it's not fit for them to live in.
Tomorrow, special rescue boats will arrive on Shetland so that the seal rescue teams can go out to sea to try and get to those seals that survive and prevent more being washed up dead like this one. Hugh Pym, News at 10 on Quendale Beach in Shetland.
Princess Margaret left hospital today, 5 days after she was admitted with pneumonia. She walked slowly out of the King Edward VII Hospital in London this morning, but looked to be in good health. Buckingham Palace said the princess had responded well to treatment. Her next planned public engagement is in Cardiff at the end of the month. The former boxer and business tycoon George Walker has been charged with stealing £12.5 million from his own Brent Walker company. He's also charged with false accounting. Walker, who denies the charge, was ousted as chief executive of the multi-million-pound empire 2 years ago after the company ran up huge debts. Caroline Kerr was in court.
He started life as a boxer and became a multi-millionaire. Today, George Walker was in the dock, accused of stealing from the company he'd created. His career began managing his brother, the boxer Billy Walker. For George, it was the first step in creating a business empire. In the 1970s, he made $5 million out of the Brent Cross shopping centre in North London. By the 80s, he owned the William Hill betting chain and a string of casinos. In court today, Mr. Walker faced 2 charges of theft, totalling £12.5 million. And along with his co-defendant, former finance director Wilfred Aquilina, he faced a further 2 charges of false accounting. After his court appearance, Mr. Walker's solicitor made a statement.
He and his family are disappointed that these charges have been made. He denies entirely any involvement in any dishonesty whatsoever.
Mr. Walker, who fought off bankruptcy last September, was remanded on bail of £500,000. Caroline Kerr, News at 10, Bow Street Magistrates Court.
Tonight's other news, the Chancellor will decide this weekend whether or not to put up taxes to help pay for rising government borrowing. Mr. Lamont, his ministers and advisers have gone to Chevening, his country residence in Kent, where they will spend the weekend planning budget strategy. Sean Devereux, the British aid worker who was shot and killed in Somalia, has been buried at Yateley in Hampshire. Hundreds paid tribute to his work. The 28-year-old UN worker was shot dead by an unknown gunman. And 3-year-old Stuart Masters from Essex is to go to America for a liver and bowel transplant after King Fahad of Saudi Arabia donated £75,000 towards the cost. The King also helped to pay for a life-saving operation for the Manchester toddler Laura Davis. Now, tonight's focus on Britain. Detectives investigating the murder of 14-year-old Joanna Young, whose body was found in a pond in Norfolk on Boxing Day, now think the killer had an accomplice. Nearly 2 weeks on, they have few other leads. For a neighbourly country town, the police haven't had a great deal of help. At one point, they complained of a wall of silence. Some local people say that was caused by the police's own approach. Tonight, we look at a small-town murder, focusing on the effect Joanna's death has had there and why the police have made such little headway. Colin Baker reports.
24 hours a day, 102.4 FM. You're listening to Broadland.
The 4 o'clock news. Police in Wotton are searching for a 14-year-old girl who's been missing from her home for almost 24 hours. Norfolk police say they have no idea why she disappeared.
The night Joanna Young disappeared was the night she was killed. She'd taken her last walk along this frosty, foggy lane, but the police didn't know that until after they found her body. By the time they found her frozen footprints, they'd already launched their hunt for a killer. The murderer was someone with local knowledge, the police said. He was someone from the town, but they complained the town wouldn't give him up. The police accusation that they'd been met with a wall of silence brought immediate resentment from a large section of this close community. They hadn't seen a policeman since the murder hunt began, many told me. The incident room was 12 miles away, preventing local people from calling in person and in private to offer whatever scraps of information they might have had. The town's expectation of a wave of door-to-door inquiries never quite materialised, but they did, 2 weeks on, get a mobile police station. Joanna's body was found in a water-filled pit on farmland a mile out of town.
I didn't do the crime, but I wish the person who did do the crime would just come forward.
No one from the farm has yet been interviewed, but Ryan Furman has, for 10 hours in a police station interview room. He was Joanna's boyfriend.
Jo wouldn't have walked up here on her own. She would have had to be in with someone else.
How are you coping? People saying things about you too?
Well, you know, things people just saying, you know, oh, look, here comes a murderer, you know. You overhear these things, you're not meant to hear them, but you did. So it's not a very nice thing to hear, so, you know, I can't put up with that. I thought, you know, I'd went to work to try and take my mind off things, but it was worse.
Joanna's parents, Bob and Carol, spend a while each morning opening the numerous sympathy cards and letters that pour in, many of them from local people. It's in stark contrast to the thought that someone in the community is protecting their daughter's killer. Joanna's Christmas presents remain untouched, and a family may decide to give them to a charity shop in the town.
Make a little bit more sense of perhaps what has happened, you know. She doesn't get benefit from them, but somebody else could.
Detectives have been forbidden by their senior officer from attending news conferences. So the spokesman for the inquiry is a constable who lives in Watton.
It's a small rural community, accepted, but it's a town of 6,000 people. These facts will not be hidden forever.
Someone has to talk.
Someone has to talk. Eventually, how can they possibly keep this to themselves for a long time, if not forever?
The police need a name. Many in the community wish that they could give them one, if only to eradicate the fears and suspicions of their neighbours. Colin Baker, News at 10, Watton, Norfolk.
Tonight, Norfolk Police said they had many more calls from the public in the past 24 hours and said again they were sure that the vital clue they're looking for would come from within the local community. And we're returning now to tonight's top story. In only a few minutes from now, the deadline for Saddam Hussein to remove his missiles from the no-fly zone in southern Iraq will expire. We're going back now to Bill Neely in Washington. Bill, a statement from the White House in the last 10 minutes.
Yes, just in the last few minutes, Marlon Fitzwater, the president's spokesman, has said there is a good deal of movement of Iraqi missiles in southern Iraq. He says the disposition of missiles is now less clear. And he says the White House is keeping the situation under close scrutiny. Also, from the Pentagon within the last few minutes, 30 jet fighters have just left the US aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk to fly over southern Iraq. F-18s, F-14s and A-16s. Now, it could be that they're going in over southern Iraq to check out exactly whether these missiles have been removed, or this could be the first strike. So the war of nerves and the uncertainty continues right up to this, the final minute.
Bill Neely in Washington, thank you. So, a night, maybe many nights of uncertainty ahead as we wait to see if Saddam Hussein has once again provoked the Allies to the point of military intervention, or whether he has indeed backed down. ITN will bring you all the latest information throughout the night and over this weekend. But for now, it's goodbye from all of us here on News at 10. Good night.
Hello, good evening. If anything, it's the calm before the storm at the moment, with a very windy weekend ahead of us and gales on Saturday and Sunday. So on Saturday, we're expecting severe storms even in the very far north. Then exposed parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland and the northwest of England could be plagued by gales, just plain old windy further south. Then come Sunday, it's very much a repeat performance of this highly windy scenario. So our wind flow chart here highlights the culprit, this low pressure having travelled all the way up from the west, and this really is set to bring us the first of our wet and windy spells. Now, this is the way our Met Office computers sees this evening's rainfall working out, sinking southwards all the while, some fairly hefty bursts of rain, and then allowing colder, clearer weather to tuck in behind into northern parts. So on to tomorrow's weather, and really not the very best of weekends. Starting off with England and Wales, and here a dull, wet and windy start to the day. Forget the brolly, it's probably going to be too windy in any case. Further north, a much brighter weather picture, but as you can see, a fair few showers around. Then during the course of the day, it's a case of this brighter weather slipping southwards, getting into the north of England, parts of Wales, even the southwest. At the same time, all this rain pushes southwards. By the end of the day, that rain ought to have cleared southern counties, so at least a glimmer of hope for central and southern parts. But look at the map further north. Here we see a number of showers and literally a bit of everything thrown in. Rain, hail, sleet, snow, even blizzards across the highlands. As far as temperatures go, academic really, around about the mid-40s, a very raw day and very windy. Now, Sunday's wind flow chart shows another low, meaning yet another wet and windy day. That's all from me. Good night.
Meridian late tonight, the man at the centre of the Bosnia aid controversy disappears. A row over council tax in the Test Valley. And factory staff narrowly escape an explosion. Good evening. The man at the centre of a mystery over tons of undelivered aid for starving Bosnians has apparently disappeared. Jerry Pierce from Poole was supposed to be taking the goods from a warehouse in Bournemouth, but they're still there. Mr. Pierce has now vanished from an hotel in the former Yugoslavia, leaving behind an unpaid bill. Guy Phillips reports.
Stacked high in a Bournemouth warehouse, boxes of clothes, food and medicines which should have been delivered to starving families in Bosnia before Christmas. It's unlikely the goods will ever get there. The man in charge of delivering them has gone missing. Jerry Pierce had his passport seized by the authorities in Split 2 days ago. Now he's vanished, leaving behind an unpaid hotel bill of £3,500.
He told us, now I'm going to England, and we ask money. And he said, oh, I have now money. I must go first to England, and then I come back and give you your money.
The unpaid bill includes almost £800 for accommodation for 7 people, £210 for a Christmas dinner, and a telephone bill for £1,700. At the warehouse in Bournemouth, they're about to throw out the perishable food, which is now going off. A charity in Christchurch today offered to transport the aid to Bosnia themselves.
A lot of people all over the country have been very well-meaning, the same people that are donating to us. It shouldn't be in a warehouse, it should be over in Bosnia.
But the warehouse says legally the supplies can't be moved without Mr. Pierce's authority.
There's a new row over the council tax. People in the Test Valley area of Hampshire are being charged extra if they get better services, such as a swimming pool. People in Andover will pay £23 more than in Romsey. Max Prangnell explains.
They say it's the beginning of a slippery slope in the Test Valley, charging people who live in Andover more for their amenities such as swimming pools and streetlights than those that live in the surrounding countryside. But that's just what the Conservative-controlled council is planning to do when the poll tax is replaced in April. The council is set to charge those who live in the town itself an extra £23 more than those that live in the valley's picturesque parishes. It says country folk pay enough anyway through a parish tax, and besides there are more amenities in Andover. But it's an argument that's already splitting the council.
The people in the rural areas are benefiting from Andover. Exactly. Andover is losing everything to keep the people in the rural villages happy.
The Test Valley Council is reported to be the first in the country to be making a distinction between the town and the down.
I don't think people will be cheering in the streets that there's a slightly extra charge in Andover, but I do ask them, compare the charge that they will be facing with their neighbours in Winchester, in Eastleigh, in Southampton, and they'll find yet again that Test Valley has a lower tax.
The council has delayed a final decision until next month.
Staff at a Hampshire factory ran for their lives this morning after an explosion. The accident on a quiet industrial estate at Borden is being investigated. Kerry Swain reports.
Burnt-out staff cars were buried under rubble. An hour earlier, people would have been in them arriving for work. The explosion ripped the building apart. Walls were blown out. Victory Workwear moved to the Woolmer industrial estate in Borden only a year ago. They wash rags used in industry. The blast and fierce fire have wrecked valuable machinery. Staff here had an incredible escape. They were in this part of the factory having their tea break when the explosion happened. Only minutes earlier, they'd been working in the part of the factory which has been gutted in the blast.
We had a very large bang and the building actually shook. I actually thought that a vehicle had reversed into the building, so I ran downstairs to have a quick look. Didn't see anything. Came out the back of the building here, looked across and could see that some sort of explosion had taken place.
The cause of the explosion isn't known. A gas leak has now been ruled out. Investigations are continuing.
A 16-year-old boy has been killed and 2 other youngsters seriously injured when a car went out of control and hit a tree in the New Forest. The accident happened on the B3055 road at Balmer Lawn between Bewley and Brockenhurst. All the teenagers in the car were students at Brockenhurst College. Firemen called to the scene spent 20 minutes freeing one victim trapped in the wreckage. A 4th teenager in the car was taken to hospital with minor injuries. Police say the accident happened on a bend. It's not yet known why the driver lost control of the car. Police say he was 17. A row has broken out between environmentalists and the government over the new Brighton bypass. The Department of Transport is proud of this section of the A27. It's given it star billing in a new handbook on how roads should be built. But Friends of the Earth say it's an example of how not to build a road, calling it an ecological disaster. The oldest newspaper in Hampshire made headlines today by publishing news on its front page. For the first time in 220 years, the Hampshire Chronicle has done away with its traditional front-page advertisements. The editor decided to make the change to try to sell more newspapers. Finally, teachers at St Augustine's School in Weymouth are all wondering whether they're suffering from double vision. 4 sets of identical twins have just started there. First, there's Darren and his brother Michael, Laura and her sister Charlotte, Natalie and Nina, and Deanne and Katrina. But despite the similarity, teachers can tell them apart. And that's all the Meridian news for today. Our next bulletin is at lunchtime tomorrow. Good night.
Good evening. Well, a few spots of rain around already, and I think we're going to have this rain with us on and off through the night. After midnight, it's going to get quite misty and murky with patchy fog over the highest ground. Your lowest temperatures are at the moment around 41 degrees Fahrenheit. By dawn, they could well be pushing the 50-degree mark. Now, our chart for noon tomorrow, that shows tonight's front and rain moving out of the way, brightening up for the afternoon, but we've got a very wet and windy morning to come. Tomorrow morning itself, outbreaks of rain right through the area, some of them on the heavy side, southwesterly gale force 8 winds in the channel, 25-mile-an-hour inland, but by midday starting to brighten up in the north and the west, and by late afternoon it's sunny spells just about everywhere, and the winds easing down as well. Your best temperatures 10, that's 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all from me now. Good night.
They're young, hopelessly in love, but it's a relationship forbidden by law. She's 15, pregnant, yet still waiting for her first sex education lesson at school. As teenage